Let's get joined up. Today's show is brought to you by Audible, and right now you can get a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/joinedup. There's over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. So thanks for tuning in to the Joined Up Writing Podcast, a regular show about all things writing, including interviews with authors, screenwriters, and key figures from the publishing industry, plus loads of hints, tips, and inspiration for all kinds of creatives. You can follow us on Twitter at JU Podcast, leave a quick iTunes review, or just tell a friend. Right, cue that cheesy theme tune.
Put down your pen and stop your typing. Grab yourself a drink, 'cause it's Joined Up Writing.
Hello and welcome to the Joined Up Writing Podcast, where a little procrastination can go a long way. I'm Wayne Kelly, and it's episode 111 with British-born, now LA-based screenwriter Trevor Miller. Trevor's got loads of wisdom, from some of the basics of screenwriting to his thoughts on TV today and his advice for aspiring writers and creatives of all stripes. I'll keep my intro short because I'm recording this pretty much straight after the intro to episode 110 so that I can schedule these episodes for release while I'm away on holiday. I really haven't got too much to add anyway, other than a quote I heard from a film I recently saw called Fighting with My Family. That's the film that's written and directed by Stephen Merchant and produced by The Rock, if you haven't heard of it. It's about the true story of the British family of wrestlers who auditioned to become part of the WWE roster. It's a great film that I highly recommend, but in amongst all the kind of knockabout humour and the usual sports film tropes, one quote stood out to me, and I think it's something that we can apply to all our creative lives, and it's this. Just because millions of people aren't cheering you when you do it, it doesn't mean it's not important. So how many of us have got a tendency to just measure the success of our creative endeavours on how much money we make from them, or how many people are reading or watching or listening? Because I know that I do. It's something I think a lot about with this podcast, for example. But then I'll get a tweet or an email from someone telling me it's inspired or helped them in some way, or I realise that I'm just incredibly lucky to be able to share time with so many talented and creative people. And the same goes for my writing, whether it's songs, books or scripts. Sometimes we need to remind ourselves that creativity can and should be a worthwhile activity in and of itself. And it also fits in with something that Trevor says towards the end of this episode, actually. So anyway, speaking of which, let's crack on with today's interview with Trevor Miller. So Trevor is a writer, director, author and playwright who's writing the Sunday Times called Sharp and Lacerating Like a Broken Bottle. His plays include Heart of Saturday Night and The Flesh Trader, both of which debuted at the London New Play Festival. His novel, Trip City, was published in 1989, and now Trevor lives in LA, having worked on screenplays and rewrites with a diverse roster of actors including Sylvester Stallone, Ryan O'Neal and Laurence Fishburne. It was lovely to chat over Skype back in April, so I hope you enjoy the chat. Thanks for joining me on Joined Up Writing. I appreciate it. So why don't we start off just by telling us where you are and how you are, what you're up to.
Well, I'm in Los Angeles, California. It's 1:05 in the afternoon. I'm in a neighborhood called Los Feliz, which is, I suppose, the nearest landmark that anyone would make any sense to anyone anywhere else is Griffith Park Observatory is literally 5 blocks up the hill from me.
Oh, yeah.
Griffith Park Observatory, as seen in I think Rebel Without a Cause, amongst other things.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
So that's where I am. I'm currently writing up a treatment on a reality show that I got myself potentially roped into. And then also I'm doing I'm writing a pilot for a college assignment, because at the grand old age of nearly 54, I'm doing my master's degree in screenwriting at the David Lynch Graduate School of Cinematic Arts, which is, sometimes I have to go to Fairfield, Iowa, Sometimes I do other bits of it online. But my new teacher, or mentor, should I say, is a lady called Antonia Ellis, who was producer of Sex and the City and a new show with Alan Cumming that's, I think, on CBS, but she's currently at Netflix.
And she's mentoring you.
She's mentoring me on this new series that I'm trying to put together, which is it was supposed to be like a noir comedy, but I think it's turned out less comedy and more noir.
More noir.
But it's something. Growing up, I used to watch things like Pennies from Heaven on British TV. I remember watching that with my mum in the 70s.
Yeah.
And I always wanted to write things that had musical elements in them. I mean, ironically, my first novel, now published 30 years ago in June, Trip City, was originally released, packaged with a soundtrack cassette. By somebody called a guy called Gerald, who nobody under 45 will probably ever have heard of. But he had a hit record in 1988 called Voodoo Ray, which was a landmark record. It was played in the clubs, and it was used on a lot of things on TV, I remember. But he was from my hometown, and the publisher of my first novel, who worked for a man called Brian Aldis, who died recently. It was Brian's kind of fledgling publishing imprint, and they wanted to. I was one of the first books they did was my book, and they wanted to. The guy who ran the company, who lives in Australia now, funnily enough, he'd seen this novel called The Mambo Kings Play Songs of Love, and I don't know who published it, Faber and Faber, some big publishing company, and they released it with a flexi disc of Mambo music, which he thought was the most tremendous thing. So he had this idea. I mean, again, this is 1989, that we would release it with the soundtrack cassette. I mean, it's funny, 30 years ago, I don't even remember how the conversation started. And we recorded 5 tracks in this studio, and they put them on a cassette, and they packaged the whole thing together. And so there you have it. And funnily enough, people, as a joke, occasionally send me links on eBay of first editions in the original packaging, like marked up at like $1,000.
Yeah, it's become like a real artifact now. So take us back a little bit. So obviously, for people listening to that, they know where you are. You're in LA, but I'm detecting that's not, as you've kind of alluded to, it's not an American accent there. So give us an idea where you were brought up originally, and kind of.
Well, I'm from Chorlton, at the edge of Manchester. Well, it's not really at the edge. It's near. I grew up near. For any of the soccer fans out there, football fans, should I say? I grew up near a Man United football ground at the bottom of Warwick Road South, which is where the metro station is. It's not even called, I can't even remember what it's called now, but it's the metro station that you get off to go to Man United. I grew up there. My father had a record shop in Moss Side in the 60s. That's where I grew up. Yeah.
So how did you sort of find yourself writing? Was writing something that you're interested in from a really early age? Do you remember the first thing you wrote?
I had a friend I went to school with, and we were all leaving high school and trying to, deciding what we wanted to do to go to college and what have you. And he pointed out to me what was then called the Polytechnic of Central London. And it was the only college or university that had anything in the arts really right in the central London. It was on a street called Riding House Street, which is literally just round the corner from Oxford Circus. So I was applying to do like the history of art at Stoke-on-Trent Poly and some other like nonsense I don't even remember. And he'd said to me, there's this landmark media studies course at the Polytechnic of Central London, or PCL. And he said, so he showed me the thing, and you had to apply. And part of the application was you had to write the script of a play or a TV show or a radio play. And I suppose I was like 18, and I wrote this thing, which again was a little bit reverential to those old Dennis Potter things. So I wrote that and I sent that in. I ended up going for an interview, and the guy who interviewed me was a man called David Cardiff. David Cardiff's wife was Lynn Barber, who wrote An Education, the movie's based on, you know, and she's a famous journalist. Anyway, he just took a she liked me, and he said, you wrote one of the most bizarre things that anyone's ever sent us. So I'm like, okay. So that was that, and it was a course in journalism, radio, and television. And by, I think, the end of the second year, you could sort of choose one. So I ended up doing the TV thing. There was a TV studio in the building, funnily enough, and that's the people I went to college with are like John Ronson went to my college in the same program. My other friend who was in the film and photography program, I'm not friends with John Ronson, actually, so I don't want anyone to think I am. I used to play poker with him and always win, and I think we were really mean to him back then. And I think he still remembers how mean we were. From an exchange I had with him recently, I would think he did. And then also Seamus McGarvey, who is two-time Academy Award nominated cinematographer. He was my other friend at college.
Nice.
So that was it. And so I was in London, and I was in the nightclub business. So I ran into somebody who was working for Brian Aldiss, who I knew. And they said to me, and this would have been, 1987, something like that, maybe 87, 88. And he said to me, we're looking maybe to do a book of short stories. And I said, I've got a great idea for a novel. And I didn't really. I just
just said it.
I was,
you saw an opportunity and you went for it. Yeah. And,
he said, well, if you can write the first chapter of it and send it to us, because again, you have to understand, this is when, at college we were working on a Macintosh 512, which was the first Macintosh computer. And that would have been, I graduated in 1987. So it would have been, this would have been 1988. So I sent some stuff to him. And next thing I knew, they were giving me a contract to write this novel that I had no idea what it was going to be, really. I sort of, I'd written the first chapter, and the rest was on a wing and a prayer. And that's 30 years ago in a couple of months, well, just a little bit more. And that was it. And I suppose it made me a little bit of a cause célèbre in the UK for about 5 minutes. And that's how I ended up meeting John Rutter. That's how I ended up with an agent in New York. And that's how I sort of ended up over here. Not really, I didn't have some grand plan to do any of this. So that's it. I mean, there was no great plan for me. No. I suppose I taught myself how to do this. I think there was a time where I didn't really know how to do it, and I was making it up as I go along. But now I've written so many different kinds of things for so many different kinds of people, and you come across a lot of people who, even in the film business, who can't really write a script and they get paid to do it. I mean, I used to make most of my living as a rewrite guy, and rewriting other people's work, and that's where you really learn the business. I think you learn it from seeing how bad so much stuff is.
And what sort of things?
Largely, Sorry?
Yeah, I was going to say, when you say you're rewriting things and you're looking at things and you're reading it and you're saying, I think it's bad. For you, when you first started doing it, or when you sit down and do it now, or whatever, what are the sort of common things that you see jump out, like that? Especially,
I mean, listen, if you look at any script of any film that's been made, chances are it will have the kind of errors that are rudimentary errors that everyone says you shouldn't make. I mean, for instance, you look at a Tarantino script; it's got run-on dialogue that if it wasn't Quentin Tarantino, no one would write that because the dialogue chunks are just too big and too wordy, and then stylistically, maybe Quentin Tarantino or other people who, I think he's kind of old now, and I think people do a more pared down thing now. But I suppose the obvious things are people write really poor slug lines, and what amateur screenwriters never seem to realize is the slug line is how you break down a script to be able to schedule it and actually make it. And if the slug lines are weak or don't make sense, nobody can break down the script, so nobody can make it. So the first errors are usually slug lines.
So for people that there'll be people that are listening to this that maybe they've not even written a script before. So give them an idea. What is a slug line? So how does that work in a script?
A slug line is when you see a movie script and it says interior, exterior, then the location, then the dash, and the time of day. The time of day being day or night. That's a slug line. And a good slug line tells you in detail where it is, and it also gives you an idea of it's day or night. And the reason experienced people only write day or night, unless it's for a reason, unless it's important that it's 4 a.m. or 4:20 a.m.
Yeah, or if it's continuous or something from the previous scene.
No. But you see, again, there's the mistake, because continuous makes it impossible to schedule. We have to say, if we put continuous or continued, depending on what school of thought you follow. But if it's continuous, we still have to put day or night, because what happens is it's like continuous from when. If there's three scenes that say continuous, right, and 4 pages ago it says night, the producer scheduling it, has got no idea. So those are rudimentary things. Then we get into stylistic things and technical things, like people write massive descriptions of things that are irrelevant. If somebody says sunrise, I don't need a description of what kind of sunrise it is. I know it's sunrise. I know what a sunrise looks like. And depending on who's making the film at what level, that sunrise can look like one thing or another. So, that's the skill of the filmmaker as opposed to the writer. But what happens with amateur writers, and you see it all the time in my end of the business, you see people writing a lengthy thing to represent a sunrise, or a parking lot, a car park. It's like, how many words does it take to describe a car park? It should take the word car park. But people like to describe a rundown car park with 3 sentences. Yeah. So in the professional game, we see that as somebody who's a little bit amateurish, because they don't. Screenwriting is a very, very particular form and format. And lots of people who even do it professionally don't really get it. If you look at the current masters of it, if you look at somebody like Brian Helgeland, or you look at somebody like Tony Gilroy, you look at a script like Michael Clayton. The great thing about Michael Clayton is it's filled with detail, but very unique details that set a scene and make us feel something. He's not describing a parking lot. The reason he's describing the ID badge and the Rolex going to the basket when the guy goes into the poker game is so later on, when he has to leave the place and he's running late, he's got to grab all his stuff and put it in his pockets. And by doing that, that's what makes him those few seconds later. So the guy who's putting the bomb in his car has got time to get out of the car.
Yeah, it's there for a reason.
These are very, very clever things, and also masters like Brian Helgeland, Tony Gilroy. But
they're specifically telling you as well. They're specifically telling the filmmaker the things that we need to see and that we need to care about.
Exactly, but most importantly, what he's doing, and you've hit on it there, care about. See, what a great writer does is he writes stories that, because the scripts that we're reading largely are scripts of things that have been made. That's what's circulated on the internet.
Yeah.
That's what anyone shows you to read. They say, read the script. It's of such and such a movie, right?
Yeah.
Now, the whole thing is when it's already a movie, the script doesn't matter because you can watch the movie. But when you're in the business of trying to sell this work, or when you're in the business of trying to get hired to rewrite other people's work, the key is, can you write things that people care about? Can you, I'd like to say, I'm reading this book called Writing for Emotional Impact by a man called Carl Iglesias that my friend Michael Holden, who's a big rewrite guy, recommended to me. And I'd seen Carl Iglesias' lectures online, but I'd never looked at this book, and it's a very interesting book, and I highly recommend it for anyone because what it really does is, in the end, there's only one response to a screenplay that counts, only one, and that makes somebody go, wow, and want to read it to the end. Any other response, doesn't matter whether they think you're a good writer, it doesn't matter whether they think it's technically proficient, it doesn't matter if they think it's a good story. Unless they're saying wow and turning the pages and reading it to the end, unless you can do that, then it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how good or bad it is, because you can look at, there's plenty of stuff that we look at, or I look at, and I think, wow, well, this person's skilled, but this just isn't, I've seen this 100 times before. I don't care. I don't care for a second. So unless it really makes you care, unless it makes you laugh or cry or want to follow somebody through a journey and say, wow, what happens to Creasy at the end of Man on Fire? Does he escape? Does he get killed? Is the girl safe? What happens? Because Brian Helgeland has really made us care about this world and this kind of troubled man and the young girl, and does she get saved? Does she get killed? So that's in screenwriting, which is what I do now for the major part. I can't speak about anything else, but unless you can emotionally engage a reader and make them say, wow, you failed. And that, my friend, is a lifetime's work, to be able to get that wow out of somebody with 95 or 100 pages.
Well, it's similar in a way. I mean, I've spoken to literary agents when they talk about novels or publishers, and when they obviously get the slush pile, and an editor described it as basically, give me a reason to keep turning the pages, because she's looking for an excuse to drop it, because she's got...
But you see, the difference is this. With a book, the manuscript is a version of the finished article. With a film script, it's a million light years away from the finished article, because I don't just have to edit it and then make a cover and print it out. What I have to do is I have to get finance, get a director, get actors, schedule it, film it, finish it, market it, sell it. So it's a different kind of... It's like, I suppose being a screenwriter now is like being an architect in the Wild West. It's like, are you going to find a town that wants a new church building? And you're drifting through a wasteland of bandits and crazy people. So
that's a good metaphor. I like that.
Right. Good.
So what obviously you've, from a lot of what you've talked about, you've worked a lot in film and you've done a lot of rewrites in film and stuff. What are your thoughts regarding the current kind of TV renaissance and the way that obviously that's kind of where it's at now?
That's all there is now. That's all there's going to be. And the blessing and the curse of it is Netflix and Amazon and Hulu and Crackle and all these different things, and the new one that Jeffrey Katzenberg is launching, and this one and that one, and Apple's launching one. What's great is for people like me who got shut out of the studio business a little bit. It's a new kind of Wild West for us. It's where people are making things, and they're making lots of things, and they're spending money, not like people are spending on, Marvel's latest nonsense, but they're making things, and some of the things are really good, and some of the stuff that I see, some of the episodic, whether it's I binge watched the new Greg Araki series called Now Apocalypse. Just it was a colleague of mine told me to watch, and I watched the first episode, didn't like it, and then I gave it a chance. It's really interesting. A great many series that I watch and I love, whether it's slightly older like Hell on Wheels, or we get more current like things like Bosch or whatever, or there's the thing with Billy Bob Thornton where he's the kind of drunken attorney.
Yeah, brilliant.
I think that what it is, why it's different from movies, is because it's incredibly current. It feels current. It looks current. It's shot in real places. Because what's happening is they're making this stuff fast, and they're turning it around fast. And it's like, before you turn around, it's a new season and you can binge watch it. And there's the problem. Yeah. Because the problem is, I'll give you an analogy of someone of my age and something that you may or may not appreciate. Morecambe and Wise in my father's day started off basically as a vaudeville act of sorts. Yeah. And what would happen is they would tour the country, and then they would do a summer season, basically
with one lot of material,
with the same 90 minutes of material, and then all of a sudden they have a TV show, and that same 90 minutes worth of material that they toured with for a year gets chewed up in 3 half-hour shows, and in 3 weeks, everyone in the entire country has seen it. So they need to do more. So all of a sudden, that 90 minutes of material that they lived off for a year, now they only live off that for 3 weeks. So that's the the upside and the downside of new televisual paradigms, is that all of a sudden they need loads of new shit, but whatever you write, it's going to get gobbled up in 5 seconds.
Yeah, but as you say, it does sort of create. There is an amazing opportunity there, isn't there? Because there is all this demand for the content now.
Well, it's like punk rock. It's like back in the day when I was, in my 20s, everyone had their own little record label. I mean, at first it was punk rock, but then it was everyone had their own dance music label and was pressing up their own 12s and their T-shirts and promo and this and that. And this is a little bit the same. Obviously, it's a bit more corporate and a bit larger, but there's lots of different. Like, there's guys I know who were writing. I'm not even going to say who it is, but he was writing what I consider action B movies. He stepped aside into TV, and now he's got a massive show on Crackle, and he created it, and it's got an audience. And I think I haven't actually watched it, but I think it's probably really good. And so for even me, I mean, here I am, and again, it's a college exercise, so who knows where it'll end up. But here I am with a person who produced 96 episodes of Sex and the City, and she's going over my, series kind of Bible that I'm putting together. So it's a fascinating time, and I just hope I'm not too old to benefit from it, because when you get in your 50s in TV and movie age, that's, it's like dog years. It's like all of a sudden you may as well be 150. You know what I mean? Because you're going against someone who's like 25, and they supposedly know what's hip and hot. Although I don't necessarily think that's always true. But
well, you've lived the life, yeah. But the flip side of it is you've lived the life and you've got something to say.
Right, but I'm not sure anyone cares anymore. I mean, I look at some of these things, and I see like a show like The Rookie with Nathan Fillion, where he's like the middle-aged rookie cop, and I think, wow. And it is good, and it's modern, and there is some middle-aged man in the lead, and I think, yeah, okay, something's possible. And then I look at something like now Apocalypse, which is all mostly kids, and it appeals to me because of its nowness and because of certain things in it. But then I think to myself, well, Greg Araki's probably my age, around there, not far. But the other people, there's other people involved in it who have to be young because the tropes in it are millennial tropes, and which I know what they are. But the question is, can I write them convincingly, authentically?
I still think, though, because there are more channels now, as you say, and there's more this need for content, and I do think there's more diversification. I do think there are more, what would have been in pre-internet would have been niche stuff, would have been very, very niche. The great thing about the internet is it is the home of the niche, but now these niche, a global niche now, it can be multi-million audience.
But look at this, look at all those, that company outside my hometown, run by a woman who some of my friends know locally and for other reasons, but a company, is it called Red Entertainment?
Yeah,
and they do Happy Valley and a bunch of those detective procedural things set in the North.
Yeah,
those things are all huge on Netflix over here.
Right,
huge.
Yeah,
and what's great is it means to say, because there would have been a time with those kind of things, if you played them on American TV, it would be like playing The Harder They Come.
Sure,
in the sense that it may as well have been in Jamaican patois for a lot of Americans. They would have needed subtitles because they're still thinking at that point, and I'm saying not even less than 10 years ago, they're still thinking that English people speak like
Mary
Dick Van
Poppins.
Dyke in My Fair Lady or Corky Sinclair in Waiting for Guffman, ow, ow, ooh. They really think that, but now they've seen all these things. They've seen The Office, they've seen that Ricky Gervais thing, Afterlife. It's hugely popular here because all of a sudden those accents and those kind of people are not, even Russell Brand, who I'm not a huge fan of for certain reasons, but I think he's super smart and I can understand why his stuff is popular. But again, even his accent, you would never see him or anything, and all of a sudden, dudes like him are in everything. Northern accents you hear in America now on TV, blue collar, like working class accents, you would never hear that. You would hear. I mean, you would literally, the only things that were popular here were like Upstairs, Downstairs, because. I mean, it's ironic, and I've never watched Downton Abbey, but just the glimpses that I've had, I'm like, why is anyone remaking Upstairs, Downstairs? Crying out loud.
Exactly, because they laugh
like,
it up.
I'm just like, but again, all those actors off there, particularly Dan, can't remember his last name. He's in tons of American things now. They all do. See, all those actors do good American accents as they do British accents. So it's fascinating. It's a fascinating time. And I think for anyone who is writing in the UK as opposed to writing here, it doesn't matter anymore.
Yeah. Just before you go, because I'll let you go, I know you've got other stuff to do. Just final question then. So bearing in mind there's obviously lots of aspiring writers and creatives and stuff that are out there listening to this. So what would be your final piece of advice to them as they go on their merry way?
It's two things. Learn what you do. Learn it. Because it's very simple. Like, for instance, you wouldn't think about, going to the library, buying a book on brain surgery and going home and cutting your wife's head open, would you? Everyone would think you were mental, right? So by the same token, to write a novel, to write a screenplay, to write short stories, try and learn your craft. Don't just think that because you've done it for 5 minutes and you write loads of texts, it's the same thing. This is a thing that you have to learn. I don't know whether you have to learn it for a year or whether you have to learn it for 50. I couldn't come up with that answer.
Probably never stop learning, I think, is the answer, isn't it, really?
Don't think you can anyone can do it, because it can't. You can't. You have to learn how to do it. Secondly, is once you've learned, understand that good fortune in this business, because it's a business.
Mm-hmm.
If the minute you want anyone to publish your book or buy your screenplay or put your short story in the newspaper or online or whatever, it's a business. So because of that, you have to understand one thing. Regardless of all the rejections, and I've had thousands of them in 30 years, I could paper this apartment with the rejection letters and emails.
Mm-hmm.
Don't give up. You have to keep on keeping on, because, as the saying goes, good fortune is usually just around the corner. All you have to do is keep walking towards it.
Absolutely. Well, that's a great place to end. I really appreciate that. That's great advice.
You have to keep on keeping on, because if you don't, then all the struggles become invisible. Because it's like if a tree falls in the forest and there's no one there to see it, did it really fall?
Mm-hmm.
You've got to find an audience. It could just be people reading it and thinking it's good. That's all the audience some people need. Some people need a larger audience, so that's a harder task. But it's all possible if you just keep on doing it every day, and don't let the bastards grind you down.
Absolutely. Perfect. Well, thanks a million, Trevor. It's been great to talk to you. I really appreciate your time.
Thanks, mate. Bye-bye.
Okay, thanks again to Trevor, and I'd love to hear what you thought of that interview, along with any of the other chats I've had, and you can find all of those in the archive over at joinedupwriting.co.uk. That wraps things up for another week, but don't forget you can subscribe at Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, Overcast, or wherever else you get your podcasts to have the show downloaded automatically every episode. Also remember to get in touch with all your writing news, views, questions or comments, and tweet me with why you enjoy the podcast, and I'll give you a mention in a future show. And you can do that at JU Podcast or at Mr. Kelly 2U, or you can drop me an email, wayne@waynekellywrites.com. So look out for the next episode, when I'll be chatting to debut suspense author Claire Empson. Until then, thanks for listening. I'm Wayne Kelly. Happy writing and reading, and I'll see you next time.
Joined up.